Today I'd like to talk about water profiles, and I'm going to go through the process of adding the water profile to BeerSmith and then using it to create a recipe that's going to add all the water salt additions that I need to hit that profile. The first thing you'll need to do is get your water tested. So I got my tests from Ward Laboratories, and so you can see one of the services that they offer is Brewers Testing, and you'll get back a report with these numbers. In order to order a kit on here, you'll need to go to the link here that says Pay Online. And there's an option here to order Brewers Water Test Kit. And you'll want to get this Brewers Test Kit right up here. Fill in your information. They'll send you out a bottle. You send it back to them. And you'll get a report by email that looks like this. You can see here that it's got my pH and all the other information here that I'm going to plug into BeerSmith. So with that information in hand, I go to BeerSmith and I go to the water ingredients section here. And I went ahead and added a water, and you can call this my base water. And then you're going to take the information from here and plug it into BeerSmith. So you can see here that I've got a pH of 7.6. We don't care about price and inventory at this point. The calcium, 17. The magnesium, 6. You get the idea. So I've already created one here. It's called JP's base profile. So right here, JP's base water. And here's the information from the report. So next up, I'm going to be brewing a nut brown ale. And if I have a look here at, I think it was Brewer's Friend, I've got it here. They've got some different water profiles that you can use, and I thought that Balance Profile 2 would be a good selection for this type of ale. It says it's similar to Balance Profile, but suitable for dark golden to deep amber beers. Back in BeerSmith, we're going to add the profile that we found on Brewer's Friend for Balance Profile 2. So I'll come and I'll select Add Water. We'll call this JP's Balanced Profile 2. And then we're going to take those numbers from the water profile from Brewer's Friend. So put them side by side, and you can see here that the information that we have is the calcium. It's 150. Magnesium is 10. The sodium is 80. The sulfate is 160. The chloride is 220. And the bicarbonate is, oh, I got that mixed up. The chloride is 150. The sulfate is 160. So just run that one more time. 150 calcium, 10 magnesium, 80 sodium, 160 sulfate, chloride, 150, bicarbonate. And you can also put some notes in here. So I'll go ahead and grab that as well. All right. So now we've got this profile in BeerSmith. Now what we want to do is take this and figure out what adjustments we need to our base water to hit this profile. So in order to do that, we're going to go into Tools, Water Profile Tool, and we're going to select the base profile. And this is going to be the one that we got back from Ward Labs. So I say JP's base water. Typically mash with 3.5 gallons, so that's the number I'm going to use here. And then we select the target profile. So for this one, we're going to select JP's Balance Profile 2. We're also going to say 3.5 gallons. Say OK. And then what we're going to do is click Match Target Profile. And what this has then done is taken my base water and has a nice algorithm in here to figure out what all it needs to do and sort of the best ratio of each one to come up with this target profile. So you can see here that these are the additions. If we want to hit this profile with my water, this is how much gypsum we need, how much salt, how much Epsom salt, calcium chloride, baking soda, chalk, etc. So once we have that, we're going to go ahead and click Save Totals. Actually, let's click Save Additions to Target, because what that's going to do is going to plug these numbers in here so that every time I use this profile, it's automatically going to add these ingredients to my recipe. All right, so there's that water profile in there. Now we're going to create a recipe. So I'm going to be brewing this nut brown ale from Northern Brewer. So I'm a big fan of OneNote here, and I create basically a notes for every brew that I do. And you can see that this is a kind of a darker beer. We want to do a mash at 154 for an hour. So that's great. We got a lot of good information. One other nice thing about Northern Brewer and BeerSmith is that you can go get an add-on. So here I went to my recipes and I added the Northern Brewer recipes. It's going to save me a bunch of time. So I'll return to that in a minute. Now when I go to my cloud recipes, I like to have a base recipe because there's things that I have on every brew. Things like, my finings and my yeast nutrients and, which equipment I'm using. This way I don't have to, type this in every single time. So I'll go ahead and use that base recipe as a starting point. Just copy it and paste it. And here's the copy right here. And we're going to go ahead and call this JP's Nut Brown Ale. It is a 60-minute boil. We're going to use today's date. It's a 5-gallon batch, 60-minute boil. And then here's our base stuff here. We'll also go ahead and change our style. So this is going to be a British brown ale. All right, and you can see here we've got a good starting point anyway. Let's go over to our mash tab here. And this particular kit recommends a 154 mash temperature for 60 minutes. So back in BeerSmith, we're going to go ahead and make some adjustments to that. You'll see here that I'm using the single infusion medium body, no mash out profile. It gets me pretty close to the number, but we want to be at 154. And one of the things that I like to do here is sometimes the numbers get, a little too precise, like it'll be 3.14 gallons. And I don't have that fine, that accurate or precise of measurement in my cooler. So what I like to do is sort of round this off to like 3, 3 1/4, 3 1/2, and try not to, get the water to grain ratio too far off, but just for convenience. Also, you'll note that I've got this box ticked here, adjust temperature for equipment, especially in the colder months or even the hotter months, you're going to want to adjust these numbers. And then I've got my dead space and all that in there. All right, so in order to proceed, we're going to need to add our ingredients. And this is where having that recipe, otherwise I would have had to type all this in. Because it was an add-on available, I can just go ahead and copy these ingredients. Normally when I don't have that, I'll have to go look them up one at a time. I'll pull the recipe kit out and figure out what kind of grains it is and all that. But these are already here, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this with the Control-C. I'm going to go back to my recipe, and we're simply going to drop that in there. And actually, this is not the yeast that we use, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this yeast. And that would be a good time to go over to the starter tab and talk about that. So I always use a starter. In this case, I've got one already made up, but I've got a 1 liter starter. That's about the gravity I used. I'm going to use a stir plate, sure, add it to the boiling volume. And then let's add our yeast. So this was a 1098 British ale yeast. The package date on this, there's a little bug in this this guy here, so just go ahead and if you try and put the date in right now, it'll always ignore it and use this date anyway. So I'm just going to put it in here, and then I'll open it back up, and we're going to put the actual date. This was manufactured 11/15/2017, and there we go. And you can see here that it's plenty viable. If we hadn't used a starter, it says we would have needed 3 packages, and there's our starter size. Okay, so now that all this is in place, and I had to get this all in place so that we could get our water right. We're going to go over to the mash tab again, and you can see that we need to add about 3.05 gallons. Let's drop this down to 2.5. Again, I was saying about the, I don't have that precise of a measurement. So there we go. So in order to achieve this temperature of 169, I'm sorry, 154, we need to add our water at around 169. Okay. The other thing that we need to look at is the pH. So I have another, I got some notes that I stored over here about pH settings, readings, I should say. So it's saying that for a mash pH for a darker color beers is about 5.4 to 5.6. So why don't we pick a pH of 5.5 and go with that. So I'm going to plug this in, and the way you do this is you pretend that you measured what it's saying you're going to hit at. So I just take this number that's here. We want to target 5.5, and you can see here that with my water, we probably don't even need to bother at all with the mash acid amount, the lactic acid at all. All right, now we're going to want to add the water. The whole point of this is coming back around to the water. So we want to add 3 gallons of water at 169. So if we go back to the design tab, and we're going to say add water, and this is where you can pick that profile. So we said JP's balance profile 2, and right here, just ignore this number that it comes up with. We're not treating all the water. We really only need to worry about treating the mash water or possibly the sparge water. I only treat the mash water. So we needed 3 gallons of that. Wait a minute, let me just verify that. Yep, we need 3 gallons because we've got the mash tun dead space. That's right. Add water. And then we're going to pick JP's balance profile 2. 3 gallons. We say OK. And see how we get this prompt now. It says this water profile contains mineral additions. Would you like to add these? We're going to say yes. So the nice thing about that is, if you remember those numbers, it figured out the difference between our base profile and what we're trying to target. And then when we go for brew day, we'll go ahead and add these to the mash water once we hit that temperature. So for my process, once I'll transfer this to my mash water ton at 169. In actuality, for my system, I need to add about 5 degrees because I lose temperature. But in any case, as soon as that's in my mash tun, I'll add these ingredients first. So, the gypsum, all the calcium chloride, Camden tablet, and I'll give it a good stir. And then at that point is when I dough in. Well, I hope you enjoyed this session on kind of one of the mysteries of how to use the water profile tool in BeerSmith, and hope you enjoy brewing.